This is the Blaze Radio on demand.
In the next 19 seconds, you could sell your home. Okay, it's not going to sell your home, but you're going to take a big step toward getting it sold. Go to realestateagentsitrust.com and find an agent selected by my team, a professional who shares your values and speaks the truth. Sell your home fast and for the most money. Get moving at realestateagentsitrust.com.
Now, spreading freedom across the nation. This is 3, 2, 1.
The Buck Sexton Show.
Team Buck, welcome to the Freedom Hut. It has been too long, my friends. Hope you had a fantastic Labor Day weekend. I hope you got some days off. I was supposed to be on vacation all of last week, but as many of you may know, I ended up filling in for Rush for a couple of days, and I had to do some other work on some other projects. So really, Labor Day weekend was the only holiday that I had, and I hope that you were able to enjoy it. I was able to enjoy it. So now we are back into the middle of the action. You've got a couple of months before we find out who the next commander-in-chief, the next president of the United States, will be. But I have to rewind the tape for a second here. We're going to have to do yesterday's news today, in a sense, or really a few days ago's news today. I couldn't really this was too much for me. I find out on Friday afternoon of Labor Day weekend that, think about this. If you were trying to pick a day for a DC-style document dump, right, you're going to release stuff and hope that it doesn't really get adequate coverage, doesn't really get much information. There's no better, maybe the day before Christmas, I think, or maybe New Year's Eve, but Labor Day weekend's high on the list. I think you'd have to put it in the top 5, certainly. And it's the best time between now and the election, of course, right? That's the most important thing is, maybe it would be better to release this after, on New Year's Eve day or something, but that might be too obvious. They already have the information. How could they excuse that delay? You can think that all of this is coincidence, that the FBI releases Hillary Clinton's email notes, the sort of interview they had with her, and the notes about that interview. You can think that's coincidence, I suppose. Then you'd probably also fall into the category of individuals who believe that the transfer of cash to Iran was also a coincidence, that the hostages were released the same day that we flew them a whole plane load full of cold, hard cash. That's possibly a coincidence. You could certainly think that's the case, but you don't, do you? It's asking a lot. There's a lot of suspension of disbelief involved in thinking that somehow there's no coordination of any of this. And this is troubling, because this is an FBI decision. So you have to think to yourself, why would the FBI? I know what, of course, the response would be if they had me on TV to talk about Hillary's emails, which they haven't much recently. And I wonder why that is. Better to have someone on there who is part of the Trump campaign who's just going to say, over the top, overzealous, and easily defensible things or easily defended things about Hillary Clinton, than have somebody who really understands the issue, will pull it apart, and will make any Hillary defender on TV look foolish, right? We can all see that. But when you look at what the FBI has done here, you have to think, okay, well, this is the sort of decision that's made behind closed doors, and the FBI knows that they'll be working for the next president. They're part of the executive branch. They're part of the Department of Justice. And they don't want to upset the new boss. And they think Hillary's going to be the new boss. So they're kind of doing her a solid here. When I say they, I don't mean your average field agent. I don't mean your average FBI agent. I mean the people at the top who make these sorts of decisions, because this was clear. We all know, right, that Comey and the very senior most FBI figures are the ones who would be involved in when you release the possible next president's FBI email transcript, right? That's something that would reach the very top. And as I'm sitting there thinking to myself, okay, so it's Friday before Labor Day weekend. This is when this comes out. The timing of this can't be coincidental. This is so brazen. It's all so brazen. And then I start to look into what we know about Hillary as a result of all of this and the new revelations, or really in many cases, affirmations of things we already knew. For one thing, they Politico did sort of a list of these, and they called this the oh blank moment. I'll call it the oh crap moment. When somebody in Hillary's circle who was involved with her email deleted the Clinton archive mailbox, and then used BleachBit to delete the exported files he had created on the server containing Clinton's emails. So they used a special deletion software in addition to just deleting the emails. And we're all supposed to just yawn and say that this is no big deal. This happened, by the way, after the New York Times published a story talking about the existence of the server in the first place. So someone's going to need to explain that to me. Also a coincidence, I suppose. So the public knows that Hillary's running this private server and that she's conducting a tremendous amount of official business on it, that this is outside of official channels, and that this is a very intricate setup. And that's supposed to be nothing. We're not supposed to care. She also said that she trusted the judgment of others when it came to classified. This is the sort of thing where she's being lawyerly, but not clever. Lawyerly in the sense that, well, you can't necessarily prove that she's not so stupid as to be incapable of knowing the difference between classified and unclassified. But she also can't get in trouble for saying that. She says that other individuals who were sending her classified things, she assumed they knew what they were doing. She's the Secretary of State. She's a cabinet-level official dealing with sensitive national security information all the time. But she was deferring to others on this. This is the sort of explanation that if you gave as a normal employee, you would be cleaning out your desk pretty quickly. All right. Oh, I just trusted that other people would give me. By the way, apply this sort of logic to any number of other situations, and you'll see very quickly that Hillary is above the law. This is all what this comes down to. And she's above the law because there are enough people in this country who want her to be the next president of the United States. There are enough people here who firmly believe that she is the best option that we have. And in many cases, they believe they'll benefit personally from her presidency, including the large sectors of the government, executive branch employees as well, that they're just bending and ignoring and breaking all of the rules for her. So she trusted the judgment of others. She said she didn't know what a portion marking of C, which means confidential, she says she didn't know what that meant. That's just not possible. I mean, she can't be that stupid. I've never said Hillary Clinton is stupid. Not as smart as people like to pretend she is. And I don't want to put too much weight on she didn't pass the D.C. bar, and that's why she had to go to Arkansas, because she only passed the Arkansas bar. You know, maybe she had a bad test day. I mean, she's clearly not a genius, but maybe she had a bad day. Any of us can have a bad day. She's not as smart as people want to pretend she is, but she's definitely not stupid. And the idea that she couldn't or she didn't know what a portion marking of C meant, that's just nonsense. That's just it's unthinkable, because she would be reading this all the time. And this is given in a very basic briefing whenever you get a security clearance and you sign the NDAs and do all that stuff. She also talked a bit about her concussion. I need someone to explain are we allowed to talk about Hillary's health or not? Because she talks about it and she uses it when it's convenient for her. She says, I can't remember everything. I mean, the interview with the FBI, she brought up the concussion and how she was only working a few hours at the State Department. And you hear this Hillary health truthers. This is what people say out there. I got to say, I've been very slow to talk about the health of Hillary Clinton as either a consideration or even a possible disqualifier for the presidency, just because I don't like to traffic in conspiracy theories. But I also heard the coughing fit, and I also read about her concussions and the problems she's had, and she's up there in age, as is Trump. to be fair, but she's up there in age. And I know that when Dick Cheney was going to be the vice president, I heard all kinds of stuff about his heart condition and his heart, and he's not, he can't do this because of his heart condition. And he was the vice president. I know if you listen to the left, he was actually the president, right? It was like a shadow presidency with Cheney behind the scenes, the puppet master running everything. But that's not. Anyway, on the health issue, they were willing to talk about it then. But maybe we'll play a clip later of the coughing. There's worse stuff from the Hillary revelations as well, too. And the media has already moved on, by the way. Today we're talking polls. We got Kaepernick. There's all this other stuff happening. They moved on from this as quickly as possible. There was some brief coverage of it on Friday. Everybody goes off to their holiday destination for the weekend. We come back, and it's like it never happened. She had aides that were destroying her mobile devices with hammers. Kind of unusual activity. I mean, I think most of us, for example, I know a lot of people who will turn in their old smartphone and they just erase, they'll erase all information on the device, and then they'll turn it in and exchange it and get a fancier, newer one or whatever. Usually people don't just decide to take a hammer and smash it. It's a weird thing to do. And again, keep in mind, this is supposed to be all completely unclassified information, so there should have been no need for that. What were they trying to hide? So you've got hammers smashing smartphones. You've got special software to make sure that the emails are irretrievable. You have multiple devices that can't be found, as many as a dozen, I think, maybe 13, that Hillary was using for this server, and they don't know where they are now. They lost them. They threw them out. And some of them have classified information on them. And they just are letting this go. There's no excuse for any of this stuff. No real excuse. There's good faith errors. And as I've said to you, I wish I could tell you that good faith errors when it comes to classified for normal people are treated as such. They're not. Generally speaking, the people who work in security and investigations in a lot of the sort of national security apparatus are a very by-the-book and humorless bunch who particularly enjoy making examples of the powerless and as sort of, to show everybody else this is what happens. Even if somebody makes a good faith error, they make a good faith mistake. They didn't know they're doing anything wrong. Hillary knew she was doing wrong, and it won't be used against her in any meaningful way, not legally. And what you see happening right now is a lot of the American people, I guess, just don't care. Don't care enough to do anything about it. Don't care enough to change their mind about who should be the next nominee. I do have to say to some of my never Trump friends out there, is there any level of corruption that Clinton can show? Is there any lack of remorse, recklessness with classified, recklessness with... Keep in mind, it's not even just the classified information. It's the way she treated the office of Secretary of State. The Clinton Foundation was more important to her than being the nation's top diplomat. When we're a country with the biggest, most powerful military in the history of the world, we've got tons of nuclear weapons and stealth bombers, and there are conflicts that are raging around the world. We're still at war in, well, officially one country, really several countries. We're still a nation at war, and she cares more about what's going to be included in her Clinton Foundation records than anything else. This was a top priority. She has people getting waivers so they can keep working because being Secretary of State wasn't important enough for her, don't you see? It wasn't enough. And I just want to ask some of my friends who are firmly in the never Trump category, and I think they would answer in the affirmative, and I think that they're as aware as I am of just how deep the Clinton corruption really goes and how completely unacceptable this is. But I would say to them, don't we have to repudiate this? And I know that this then pushes us in a direction that's uncomfortable for many of you, which would be voting for the person most likely to beat Hillary Clinton. At least, at a minimum, voting for somebody who's not Hillary Clinton. To my conservative friends that are thinking about casting a vote in favor of Hillary, I don't know what. For me, that's a vote in favor of America as some sort of third world clownish, not despotism, but kleptocracy. That's the word I'm looking for. Where those at the top just steal. Because that's what Hillary's doing. Using public office and public favor to enrich herself. As if $100 million isn't enough. And now she's saying that Bill shouldn't even step down from the Clinton Foundation while she's president. I mean, these people are shameless. Utterly and completely shameless. I have a deep disdain for the Clintons and what they stand for. It goes beyond policy. It's a matter of character, and it's a matter of pride in this country. I cannot believe there are people who really want to make this woman the next president of the United States. Unfortunately, I have to believe it because it still looks like a very distinct possibility. We'll get back to this. But team sponsor this half hour is Silencer Shop. Look, a silencer is a fantastic accessory for those of you who are out there shooting now, anytime in the future. And silencershop.com offers the best buying experience, period. They have a friendly and knowledgeable staff. They're always available to help or answer questions. And when it comes to doing the paperwork right for your silencer, you can trust silencershop.com. They submitted more than 60,000 forms to the ATF in 2015 alone. And buying from silencershop.com is just like buying local, since your local dealer is setting the price and making the profit. So now you can get the best price and know you're supporting local business. Silencer Shop has the best selection, so check it out. Go to silencershop.com. Again, that is silencershop.com. Help make the world a quieter place. We will be right back.
This is the Buck Sexton Show
on the Blaze Radio Network. Buck Sexton.
So Hillary's been avoiding the press. Well, I shouldn't say avoiding the press. She's only had very managed, controlled environments in which she would deal with the press. No press conferences. But now she's on, what do they call it, Hill Force One or something, right? I don't know, something like that. She's got this Hillary Stronger Together is their new slogan, which is no more or less meaningless than hope and change. And she met with the press on the plane. And I kind of wish you could see the video, but I think you can pick up just from the audio what an awkward and charmless politician she is. She walks up to the press, and this is what she says to them on her plane where they're traveling with their plane.
Hey, guys. Hi. Welcome to our big plane. It's so exciting.
So exciting.
I think it's pretty cool, don't you? Yeah. You're supposed to say yes. Are you glad to have all of us? Amy, watch the camera. I am so happy to have all of you with me. Have you missed us? I've been just waiting for this moment. And I'm no, really, and I'll come back talk to you more formally, but I wanted to welcome you onto the plane.
How was your Labor Day weekend?
It was good. It was really good. Yeah, we had a good time.
It was good. It's good. Yeah. You know, it was like good Labor Day weekend. And I'm so excited to have you on the plane. This is like, it's almost like English isn't her first language sometimes. I mean, it's like she's struggling so hard with the words. She's got this sort of big smile on it. Why just come out and be normal? I don't think she knows what normal is anymore. I think it's been so long and she's been so in the public eye. I don't think she knows how to be a normal person. She only knows how to be Hillary Clinton, not Hillary Rodham, because the Clinton part of this is very important. So she goes out and she greets the press. And I love that cringing moment, too, where she goes, "You're supposed to say yes." It's like, okay, thanks. That, by the way, was very Freudian. That was a Freudian slip, I think, in the sense that the press all understands that, like, they're there to make her look good, and that's the way this is going to be, right? There's not going to be any, like, tough questions. No one's going to try to corner Hillary and say, you know, what would you say you read exactly? What newspapers do you read, Hillary? There's not going to be any of that kind of stuff. They're not going to ask her anything that could trip her up. And she wants to make sure everyone's clear. They're on her plane. It is her turf. And if you want to have a future in at least old school print journalism and any of the major networks, you better be stronger together, ready for Hillary. You better basically be walking around with an "I'm with her" tattoo on somewhere. So that's Hillary interacting with the press. Smooth, Smooth like a porcupine, my friends. That's what's going on there. 888-900-3393. What are your thoughts going into the final stretch here before the election itself? Team, I haven't talked to you in days. Light up those lines. Be right back.
The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
What's up, Team Buck? Have you ever tried a Casper mattress? They are incredible. Casper is an obsessively engineered mattress at an incredibly fair price. It combines springy latex and supportive memory foams to create an award-winning sleep surface with just the right sink and the perfect amount of bounce. Time Magazine named it as one of the best inventions of 2015. You get free shipping and returns to the U.S. and Canada, and you can try it free for 100 nights, risk-free, in your own home. And if you don't love it, they'll pick it up and refund you everything. It's made right here in America. All you have to do is go to Casper.com/Buck. That's www.Casper.com/Buck. You can get $50 towards any mattress purchase by visiting Casper.com/Buck. Terms and conditions apply. This is an incredible mattress at a fantastic price. You can get it now via this deal. Check it out.
This is the Buck
Sexton
Show.
Fox News has this up today. Donald Trump has edged ahead of Hillary Clinton in a poll released today. CNN ORC poll shows Trump leading Clinton 45-43 in a four-way race, with Libertarian Gary Johnson at 7% and Green Party's Jill Stein at 2%. So those third and, yes, fourth candidacies could play a very important role in all of this. Just think about that for a second. Imagine the left-wing backlash at the Green Party if, in fact, there is a reason to believe that Hillary lost the election because Jill Stein was still, and Gary Johnson, of course, too, as a Libertarian candidate. I think, from what I've seen, and nobody really definitively knows this, but I think that there's been some evidence that the Libertarian Party is pulling more from Hillary right now than it is from Trump, which in some ways would make sense. So there is that. CNN ORC poll showing Trump ahead of Clinton. I am old enough to remember, because it was only a few weeks ago when the election was considered more or less already over because Hillary was so far ahead of Trump. Do you remember that? Remember the media glee when she was ahead in some polls nationally by double digits and in the swing states by a pretty wide margin as well? And I know for some of you, this isn't really cause for celebration, because you think to yourself, okay, well, not excited about the whole Trump thing either, but I don't think you'd be excited about Gary Johnson. Maybe there's nothing to be that excited about with this election. We do need to prepare ourselves for a couple of things, though. One is that between now and the election, there will be a crowding out of all other reporting. So I will find as many ways as possible to try to spice up what we're sort of talking about here with the news cycle with things that aren't election specific or election related and all the rest of it, right? I don't want this to just turn into, the latest poll says, but I just want to prepare all of you that that's going to be a reality, not just here with me in the Freedom Hut, but in general, right? Everywhere you turn, it's going to, because the media loves this, it drives ratings, and as I've said to you before, many, many times, the whole notion of news is a construct, right? It's a narrative. It's not actually sort of a series of independent events. It's people sitting around deciding what counts as an event and how they're going to tell you about it, and it's just going to be a drumbeat of all of this stuff about the election until the election actually happens, right? So you know that, I know that. I just want to say, because I'm going to get Facebook messages and people are going to be tweeting at me saying, election. We could look. Some of it is necessary, so we stay up with what's happening in the news cycle, but also some of it is just a function of, there's not a whole lot else that's going to be getting talked about. One thing that I wish would get more attention, and I didn't even have a chance to discuss it last week on Rush's show on the EIB. I was in for a couple of days, which was a lot of fun. But one thing that I didn't get a chance to address, and I really wanted to, is what a disaster Obamacare actually is. How Obamacare exchanges are failing and failing and failing. And everything that conservative critics have said about Obamacare in the past, all the stuff that's been talked about, and in terms of what will happen, right? What the real mechanisms of this. Remember, this is the most important legislation passed while President Obama was in office. And it was passed without a single Republican vote. It was passed through the sort of trick of the budget reconciliation process, so it was slipped in. And this was it's a huge new entitlement program, and then they're saying we pay for it, but that's actually not true. It's the taxpayer funds are what's keeping this thing afloat. And they said it wouldn't be offered to illegals, that illegals wouldn't be able to buy into the exchanges. That's also not true. Just as illegals can go into and do go into emergency rooms across the country for all levels of care, you have on Hillary Clinton's official campaign website now, illegals should be able to, people regardless of immigration status. I love the way that they talk about these things, right? I mean, no matter what your immigration status is, you should. So what you're saying is illegals, because otherwise, of course, somebody could buy into the exchange. There's only two kinds of immigration status, right? Permanent resident citizens, people that are legally allowed to be here, and those who are not. That's it. So she clearly wants to. She's clearly opening the door for illegals to buy into the exchanges. And the exchanges are what people like me and many, many, many others have been saying for a long time, which is that it's a mechanism for really redistributing health care from sort of middle class, middle income Americans to lower income Americans through this subsidy mechanism, and healthier Americans subsidizing older and sicker Americans. And that's all this is. It's just really cost shifting. It's healthcare shifting. It's a redistributive mechanism, and the insurance companies are just losing money hand over fist. I mean, they're getting on the exchanges, they are getting creamed, and the only way that they're going to be able to stay afloat is if there's sort of these infusions of taxpayer cash, and they'll find some way to dress it up, sort of like a ransom payment to Iran that's not really a ransom payment, right? The government will say, no, this isn't taxpayer cash being funneled in through the back door to shore up the exchanges. This is, a troubled exchange relief program or something, TERP. That actually kind of works. Those of you who are military know TERP is short for interpreter, but I mean, TERP as an acronym would be pretty good for their purposes, I think. So when exchanges are having issues, what do? They all of a sudden say they need to start getting more cash in the door, and they'll find, and the taxpayers are the ones doing this, by the way. There are also already calls for much more expensive fines to be paid, for those who are not buying anything on the exchanges. Because that was one of the ways initially that they said, well, it won't be that bad. It's either a percentage of income or a flat fee, depending on which is higher. And they're saying, well, let's forget. Excuse me. Now, if I were Hillary, I would start coughing for like 4 straight minutes, we'll play that for you later. Like I said, I'm not a Hillary a healther. I think that's, why don't people say a healther? They say it's like it's a birther for Obama's birth certificate. But if Hillary's health is a conspiracy theory, shouldn't it be Hillary healther? What do you think, John? Thumbs up on that? Hashtag healthers. Yeah, healthers. So I'm not a healther, but I mean, I think that she seems like she's got some health issues. And if you're going to be the next commander-in-chief, pretty demanding job. You're really signing up for 8 years. She'd be 76, 77 when she's done. That's getting up there. To my 70-plus-year-old Team Buck peeps listening, nothing but love for you. But the commander-in-chief job is a pretty demanding, and there's a lot riding on it, you would think. I mean, one would hope. Although all of these very senior government jobs are, in terms of the day-to-day, it's much cushier than everybody seems to realize. You know what's hard is showing up to a job that you need, that you don't like, that you could lose, where you're underappreciated and underutilized and you have no choice. That's hard. I think that's actually one of the few experiences that unites most normal Americans, right? Showing up somewhere sitting down in a cubicle and not having a panic attack, or sitting down at a desk or an assembly line or at a counter, at a restaurant, whatever the case may be. But showing up at some job and your first day not just having a panic attack when you realize this is what I got to do for now. Maybe not what I'm going to do forever. This is America after all, but for a while. And I hate this, but I have to do it. And I have a responsibility and I need a paycheck. And there are really two kinds of Americans, right? Those who have had that experience and those who haven't. And those who haven't never really understand those who have. Those who haven't can't really grasp the full anxieties felt by those who, could show up and maybe even through no fault of their own, there's no job waiting for them. And that's a big problem for them. Maybe they've got enough savings for a week. Maybe they're already in credit card debt, right? And Hillary and her ilk love to pander to those who actually show up and have to deal with those stresses in category when they're clearly in category 2. I mean, Hillary, maybe she's done it at some point in her life, but not really. Not really. It was always going to be the case that she was going to find a means of enriching herself through whatever means necessary. And she was going to be protected as soon as I think she signed on to the Clinton Express. She knew that there was a pretty straightforward path for her. But that's, I suppose, conversation for another time. Back to the healthcare aspect of this. What makes me think of this? I know I'm bouncing around, but we're going to be doing that a lot because that's how we roll. Not a lot of substance in the campaign. One of the most fascinating parts of the campaign, I think, is how little substance there's actually been on both sides of it, by the way. It's just a big contest to see who can convince more people how terrible the other person is. Not a lot of time spent on the intricacies of policy. Although Trump did give his speech last week on immigration. Look, I thought it was a pretty good speech overall. I know, you could disagree with me on that. That's fine. But when you look at what the Democrats offer nothing but exactly what we have now plus amnesty. Nothing changes. Maybe there'll be more legal entries, more visas given out, but they offer amnesty and more of the same, which just means amnesty and then another amnesty in the future. And that will change the political character of this country, and they know that. I mean, the real ultimate goal all they need is Obamacare and amnesty, and the Republican Party ceases to exist. I think we have all become so focused on how the Republican Party is now the Trumplican Party, and everyone's freaked out about Donald Trump at the reins of the GOP for right now. Although I think that's overstated, and we'll have our friend Charles Cook joining us in a little bit to talk about that aspect of it. But there's this notion that now it's all Trump's party. It's like Trump's party and we're living in it, I mean, it's Trump's election for president, but it's not Trump's GOP. It really isn't. And we'll get into some more of those details in a little bit. But they know that if they get health care and since they have Obamacare, and which is really, we have to understand that Obamacare goes through processes of metamorphosis. It's not a static thing. It's constantly changing based on the needs and wants and desires of the Democratic Party. It's not something that we can really sort of nail down in one place and say, well, this is the reality of what Obamacare is. But clearly it puts the government in control of more of your health care. And it's a mechanism for doling out favors to preferred and preferential groups, whether they be economic groups or immigration status groups, whatever it may be. And then with immigration, they're just adding voters on the Democrat rolls. That's really all they have to do. And then I think it's probably all over for the GOP. So while we sit around wondering whether Trump is, in fact, the sort of end of conservatism in this country as we know it, I do feel like behind the scenes, not even behind the scenes, I feel like the Democrat machine marches on. And the whole point of it at this juncture is, well, how do we destroy the Republican Party? How do we finish it off? Trump has rattled it maybe, and there's all this infighting, and there's what I've called and many others refer to as this sort of GOP civil war, but they're looking to make sure that this is the end. This is the end of limited government conservatism in America. This is constitutionalism replaced with a combination of progressive popular will and executive fiat, right? So constitutionalism is also dead because the Constitution will mean whatever the progressive left says it means. And that's what we're looking at. And that's, I think, going to be the new reality of America under a Hillary Clinton presidency. So packing a lot in there, but I haven't had a chance to talk to you guys in a few days. We'll go into a quick break. We'll be right back.
Buck Sexton on the Blaze Radio Network.
Dispensing the truth. This is Buck Sexton
On the Blaze Radio Network.
So Hillary breaks with precedent and actually speaks to the press, and this is how part of it goes. Play the clip.
Happy Labor Day. When we were trying to figure out where we could be, we all said, let's go to Cleveland.
Yeah, that's what everybody always says. Let's go to Cleveland.
And I want to thank Congresswoman Marcia Fudge for hosting us.
That's her coughing. Still coughing. Still coughing.
I've been talking so.
Yep.
Every time I think about Trump, I get allergic. Boy.
Look, I take an absolute rule. I take no pleasure or joy in anyone else's health issues ever. I mean, that's the one thing I think that makes us all human is we can always sympathize with other people's illnesses and understand, that it's rough and there's a basic human sympathy that goes there. So I'm not playing the clip because it's like, oh, listen, and I don't like some of the stuff I've seen on the right about, oh, they have to help her up the stairs and she's this old lady and ha ha ha. It's not that, but it seems like she does have some health issues. I feel like, okay, well, maybe it would be better for her she's got $100 million, spend more time out by the pool in Chappaqua and with her grandchildren and with her family and everything. I mean, no one's saying, be president or you're going to be forced into penury and live out your days ignominiously in a trash heap somewhere. But if you're not up to the health, wise up to the job, that is a public concern. This is why they released their medical records. So I think that's a fair line of inquiry now. I don't know why people think that's so strange. And like I said, I just want to look at this from the perspective of, is she fit to be commander-in-chief?
You're listening to Buck Sexton on the Blaze Radio Network. Now, spreading freedom across the nation. This is
The Buck Sexton Show.
All right, team, man, we're back. We're joined now by our friend Charles Cook. He is editor of National Review Online. Charles, hope you had a great Labor Day. Thanks for calling us.
I did. Thank you for having me.
So let's start, Charles, with you got a couple of pieces here I wanted to talk about. One is your point. I think it's it's one that people need to hear, especially this audience, that the GOP doesn't seem to have been Trumpified. What are you seeing that makes you draw that conclusion?
Well, I think if you look at the other elections that we've seen, I mean, leaving aside that this is a year in which 435 House seats are up, the majority of them Republican, in which a good number of Senate seats are up, you would expect to see more Trump-style figures prevailing generally in the primaries, and they haven't. But I think even more so, you would expect to see those who are blamed, who are accused of being rhino sellout globalist squishes, to be falling, and they're not. I'm thinking in particular of John McCain, original member of the Gang of Eight, a man who's been in Congress for a long time, a man who is disliked by a certain portion of the party for being an interventionist, for being an amnesty advocate, for having run, in their view, ineffectually against President Obama, then candidate Obama in 2008. He won. Marco Rubio, who we're told lost in the primaries because of his role within the Gang of Eight, who is also a hawk. He won. He didn't just win. He won by 70 points, 75 points. Paul Ryan, who's the Speaker of the House, who I like a great deal, but again, to a certain portion of the party, is blamed for everything, is supposed to be a sellout who gave Obama everything he wants. He's softer on immigration. He's more of a Wall Street Journal-style conservative. He beat his challenger by 70, 75 points. Whatever virtues Trump has, they clearly are not translating to others. Now, that's partly perhaps because political talent does not always transfer. We saw that certainly with President Obama. The mini Obamas simply have not materialized. But I think it's also because Trump is sui generis. The conditions that brought him to the nomination were unique. There were 17 candidates. The media clearly liked covering Trump. They gave him $2 billion in free media. And there were a whole bunch of bizarre perfect storm events. The exact moment Rubio faltered, the involvement of Jeb Bush and all of that money, the unwillingness of John Kasich to get out of the race, and so on and so forth. I think one could make a case that the GOP not only has not been Trumpified, but will not be.
And what about the idea that this would, I think right now, and I don't really know what consensus is in this, but the vibe that I pick up, right, I'll make this sort of personal and anecdotal, is that there's a fear of a great schism that will come if Trump loses within the GOP. Let's just assume he loses for a second, and we can talk about what you think happens if he wins. There'll be this shattering of the party, and then there'll have to be this new party. And isn't there a possibility, based on what we're seeing with some of these other elections, and there is, of course, that old idea, which has been around for a long time, that people hate D.C. politicians except for their D.C. politician. That's been the case with lots of elections stretching back for who knows how long. But what about the party just saying, okay, well, that was kind of weird, guys. Let's kind of get back to business. Can you see that happening?
Yes, I should say before I answer that I think there's going to be a reckoning whatever happens. I think if Trump loses, there will be a reckoning. I think if Trump wins, there will be a reckoning. Because those who dissent from either the so-called establishment or from the Trump position are not going to be quiet just because Trump has won. I think will not guarantee unity. Often it does, but this has been so fractious, and Trump is so far outside of the traditional Republican position that there is going to be a reckoning either way. Certainly if Trump loses, and if he loses badly, the instinct within Republican circles will be to say, well, that was a huge mistake. Let's go back to normal. The party may even do that. In many ways, I would welcome that. I don't think that the way in which Trump has run for president thus far has been something to emulate. I don't like his tone. I don't like the way he talks about minorities. I don't like his seeming laziness. They don't seem to have much campaign infrastructure in place. I don't like his impetuousness and his thin skin. I don't think Republican candidates, or any candidates for that matter, should spend their mornings fighting with second-rate news channels or with the New York Times. On policy as well, I'm more of a libertarian conservative, and although I am something of an immigration hawk, I think there is a way to talk about that that Trump hasn't mastered. I'm a free trader, so I don't like that instinct either. That said, if the Republican Party completely repudiated everything that Trump has brought to the fore, as Trump is as much a messenger as an advocate, if they were to say none of the tensions that Trump has illuminated are worth pondering, I think that would be a mistake. And clearly there is a portion of the Republican Party, and probably has been for a long time, if you look back to Buchanan, even in 92, that is out of step with the Paul Ryans of the world. And their concerns will have to be addressed. That doesn't mean necessarily the party would be taken over by that view, but certainly it's going to have to accommodate it. So there are lessons to be learned. So the answer is yes and no. I think the party has to recognize that this Trump experiment, even if he wins, has not been entirely profitable, but not to the extent that it ignores everything he has raised.
You know, Charles, I think that this is just something that I've thought of as you were talking about where Trump, sort of where Trumpism is going. The notion that there's this sweeping movement of the alt-right that is this sort of national level, populist movement that's going to, I don't see it. I know they're sort of noisy and loud on social media, but that doesn't mean very much. I don't see them catching on with the GOP base in any meaningful way. I feel like the whole alt-right thing is overstated. And I haven't had when I say overstated, I mean its influence and really more than that, its popularity. And I don't think it has any staying power. But I wanted to get your take on all that.
No, I think that's exactly right. But politics being as important as it is, especially when the government is this big, one always has to be careful as to who one encourages. Now, I don't think that there are too many people in America who think like the alt-right, but there weren't too many Americans who thought like the John Birch Society either. It was nevertheless important that the Republican Party and the right in general made it clear what its candidates and its mainstream advocates believed in. And I have not seen enough repudiation of the alt-right position from Trump or those who support him. As a rule, I don't like this game. People have said to me in the past, well, you support a party that was endorsed by, and then insert some insalubrious fellow here. Okay, but Barack Obama was endorsed by the Communist Party of the United States. That doesn't make him a communist. This happens in politics. The difference is that if you said to Barack Obama on television, do you renounce the Communist Party of the United States? He would say yes, or at least he would make noises in that direction. Donald Trump has not been loud enough in asserting himself as part of the party of Lincoln. So no, I don't think the alt-right is a force, but I do think Republicans need to make it extraordinarily clear, and I think this is more and more important now that figures such as Hillary Clinton have made public speeches on this question, that these people do not represent limited government, classical liberal, inclusive opportunity politics of the sort that the GOP professes to sell.
You know, Charles, I also read your piece, Trump should finish the race as a one-nation Tory, in which you take the, or you're willing to at least explore the position of what would an effective Trump message, pivot and message be at this point. Tell everybody listening, I mean, let's pretend we're living in a parallel universe where Trump is going to do whatever Charles Cook tells him to do to win the election between now and Election Day. But I mean, let's just, let's assume for a second that that's the case, because I think it illuminates some of what the Never Trump movement and people who are Never Trump. I think there would have been more willingness to support Trump, even with his policy flip-flops and such, if tone and sort of respectability had been a little bit different. But what do you think Trump could do between now and the election to actually win? And this is coming from somebody who's been very clear about how he feels about Trump.
Yes. Now, the platform I'm about to describe is not one that I would like. As I say, I'm more of a libertarian, or at least I'm a conservative libertarian. Nevertheless, most people do not have solid ideologies. Most people's political philosophies are inchoate. They're a mishmash. They don't think of consistency as a virtue. That being so, I would, if I were Donald Trump, attempt to sell my more nationalistic, and that's not an inherently negative word, my more nationalistic approach on immigration, on trade, on American values, in the language of inclusivity. There's been a tendency, unfortunately, with Trump to pander to a particular subsection of the electorate, to make it seem as if those who were not of that group were not welcome. I'm thinking in particular of how he rolled out his campaign in the very first 10-minute moment he had in the spotlight. He suggested Mexicans were rapists. Now, if you combine that sort of language with talk of tariffs, talk of building a wall, talk of deporting immigrants, and he doesn't always append the word illegal to that other word, you will turn people off. You will put people's backs up. On the other hand, if he had, from the beginning, said, I like trade, I'm a businessman, I need trade, America needs trade, but our trade deals are killing working-class whites in Appalachia and African Americans in Detroit and poor Hispanics in the Central Valley of California, and they're Americans and they're people I care about, and I'm going to fix it. If he had said, I married an immigrant, I married two immigrants, I am a businessman, I need immigrants, we need immigrants, but illegal immigration is hurting our people and they're not recovering. It's hurting people in California, it's hurting Hispanics, it's hurting African Americans in the inner cities who need manufacturing jobs. It's hurting white union members in Pennsylvania and Ohio. This would have been a very different message. It would have been more in line with the sort of one nation Tory message that you hear in England. Again, it's not quite my politics. I'm for inclusivity, but I'm more of a free marketeer. I'm a limited government guy. I square my circles differently. But Trump could have presented a platform that I think would have been popular. I think would have been a winning one. It's going to be difficult for him to pivot now, but if he's going to try and square his existing platform, which he can't run away from now, with a coalition that can win him the White House, that's probably his best way forward.
He hasn't necessarily. I mean, I tried to follow this, and it's one of those things where no matter how closely you follow Trump policy positions, you can be wrong within 24 hours because they can change. But it seemed like he didn't necessarily totally do an about face on deportations, but sort of backed away from it and focused more on the deportations of illegal criminals, sort of illegal alien criminals, in addition to the illegality of their status, day one, which, by the way, that's not actually going to happen either, but that's a whole separate discussion. Just bureaucratically and logistically, that won't happen day one. But he did seem to back away from the mass deportation point, not necessarily to repudiate it, but to back away from it. Do you think that's a fair characterization, or I might have missed it because he's talked about it a bunch?
No, I think that is a fair characterization. Again, I think he boxed himself into a corner. He started by taking the most extreme possible immigration position and then trying to defend it, and that's not how one wins arguments in a country this big and this bustling. One wins arguments by saying, in the days and weeks ahead, I will be considering my policy options, but let me lay out a principle. And that principle is that this is a country of laws and not men. This is a country that has borders, and this is a country whose citizens have the right to determine who joins them and who does not. Illegal immigration is hurting the poorest among us. It's hurting African Americans. It's hurting Hispanics. It's hurting whites. It's hurting men and women. It's destroying many of our children's futures. And I will be looking at policies to remedy that. And then from there, you slowly explain yourself. He didn't do that. And so I think whatever moves he now makes, he is forever going to be tarnished because in the eyes of those who don't pay attention, he's Donald Trump, the guy who wants to deport all the illegal immigrants and build a wall and start a trade war with China. And that's a difficult position to recover from.
Yeah, that's not an easy one, I have to say. It reminds me of when on CNN they asked me about the Muslim ban, and I knew right away. I was like, nope, can't go along with this one, guys. The Muslim ban thing is not going to work. And now, sure enough, he's even said, oh, yeah, the Muslim ban, we can't do that. We'll do a country-by-country sort of terrorism analysis and limit visas. I'm like, well, that's workable.
Which is fine.
Yeah, that's workable. That's but what he said originally was not.
Well, and I think this is telling that Trump makes a speech in which he says, we will ban all Muslims from coming into the country just till we work out what's going on. And then subsequently, someone else says, a much better policy would be to look country by country, do an analysis, limit visas, etc. And the Trump supporters pick up on the second position and use it to defend the first. And it's a classic Mott and Bailey way of arguing. But he did it to himself again because he took the most extreme position he can think of. He certainly got all of the headlines. But now he's the guy who wants to ban all Muslims from coming in.
Yeah, and his enemies in the media and in the Democratic Party loved every second of that whole debacle. But anyway, Charles,
Sure.
we got to leave it there for today. Everyone, Charles Cook is editor of National Review Online. You can also follow him on Twitter and read his latest at nationalreview.com. Charles, thanks so much, sir. Good to talk to you.
Thank you for having me.
All right, team. More coming. Stay with me.
You're listening to The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
Team, phone lines are open, 888-900-3393. Do give a call. Just trying to think of, I don't have enough time here to get too deep into another segment. I wanted to talk a bit about, one, healthers. I think this should be a thing now, the healthers. Hashtag healthers instead of birthers. Although in this case, maybe that's a bad idea because it has sort of a pejorative connotation. And I mean, Hillary's health seems like a legitimate line of inquiry. I mean, again, we don't root for anybody to be sick. I mean, any of you, I'm sure all of you have either dealt with personally or someone that's very close to you, a really serious or really chronic illness. And it's terrible. I mean, the one thing like the rare news story that I feel like you occasionally will see that just sort of inspire everybody to be a little happier is when they, cure some disease or have some new way of treating some otherwise horrible condition. I feel like we don't see nearly enough of those stories these days. I've been catching up on The Walking Dead recently. I fell way behind, and my little sister convinced me to get back into it. That's right. My little sister likes The Walking Dead. And I'm now in season 5. So I've been sort of binge watching Walking Dead. And of course, in any of these sort of zombie apocalypse movies, there's this whole thing of the sort of secret government medical research wing. And there's always like a genius scientist that might save the world. I hope that exists. But these days, it doesn't really feel like there's all this medical research going on, and you don't really hear much in the way of cures there's new treatments for things, but when was the last time somebody was like, hey, that disease that everybody's worried about? No one has to worry about it anymore. There was a time when that was happening, and I feel like it's been a while. Although, I don't know. They'll come up with something for Zika, I think, pretty soon. So we shall see. Team, we've got our buddy Matt Walsh going to be calling in here in a few minutes to join us. Probably a very intriguing chat with Matt, as always. Plus, our phone lines are open, team. I haven't spoken to any of you in days. 888-900-3393. Light them up. We'll be back.
The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
You're listening to The Buck Sexton Show, only on the Blaze Radio Network.
All right, we're joined now by the one and only Matt Walsh. He is the host of the Matt Walsh podcast, which you can listen to on theblaze.com. Just go and download it, theblaze.com/radio. He's also, of course, a Blaze contributor, author of the Matt Walsh blog. Matt, hope you had a good Labor Day weekend. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, I did. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk. We got 2 pieces I want to hit on, Matt. 2 of your pieces here that I think the audience is going to want to be a part of this discussion. One is, and I totally agree with you on this, so I'll just get out there and say it. I've been talking about this before you came on, that Hillary Clinton is a sick woman addicted to power, and it's pitiful to watch. I've been saying that maybe they could come up with a term like a healther or something because of Hillary's health as part of the discussion now, although I don't think that it's off the table. In fact, what's your take on all the discussions about her coughing fits and the the concussion came up in her own testimony to or not testimony, but in her own discussion with the FBI. Seems like that makes it legitimate.
I think it's a totally legitimate conversation. I've always felt that way, especially when you have, doesn't matter what age the person is, but particularly when you have someone who's elderly and both of these candidates are running for the highest office in the land. You look at the stresses of the job. Just look at Obama and Bush were both physically fit young men when they entered the office, and look at what happened to them after 8 years. And so imagine someone going in, and I know Reagan went in at 70, and everyone points to that, but that's more of an outlier, number one. And number two, he was also diagnosed with Alzheimer's like a few years after he left office. So that's not exactly the best example. And so it's already a perfectly appropriate conversation to have. And then as far as I didn't really write about this or talk about it until, as you mentioned, it came out that Hillary Clinton herself cited her own health and used it as an excuse to get out of paying the price for breaking federal law. So as soon as that happens, and she says, oh, I hurt my, I had a concussion, I had blood clotting problems, can't remember what happened. As soon as she brings it up, well, now it's definitely on the table. And either she's a complete and total liar, which we know she is a liar, but I don't think she's lying about the health problems. I think they're absolutely true. She brought them up, and so now, and then the coughing fit happens a few days later. Now it's something that I think really needs to be, at the forefront of the conversation.
And you get into it in your piece, which is just up on the Blaze today, guys. For those of you who haven't had a chance to see it yet, it's Hillary Clinton's a sick woman addicted to power, and it's pitiful to watch. I often refer to Hillary, and actually both of the Clintons, as having a hole in their souls, and that there's no amount of cash or power that can fill this. You make the point in your piece that she doesn't have to be the next president of the United States. I mean, if she is in fact ill, or if she is in ill health or declining health, it's not incumbent upon her to do this, or else she won't be able to feed her family. But she is, as you put it, addicted to power.
Yeah, that's the word that kept coming back to me. I watched that clip of the coughing fit yesterday, and the word that just came to me was pitiful. It is pitiful. I think conservatives, we despise the Clintons so much for good reason, and so when we think of them, we think of words like corrupt, liar, evil, dangerous. All these words come to mind. They're all true. But the word that, to me, more than any of those, is pitiful, because this is someone who she cannot conceive of living in a world that she doesn't control. She can't deal with the idea of just sitting back and living her last few years as a perfectly rich and powerful person, but not as the most powerful. She has to be not just powerful, but she has to be the most powerful person in the world. Imagine living with that need, that addiction, that compulsion. And it's just imagine having that in you, eating you alive. You'll never be happy. And as I talk about at the end of it, I think, what if she actually wins and she becomes president? It's very likely to happen. That to me is almost even more pitiful than the idea of her losing and being forced once and for all to just resign into obscurity. That, she'll finally, just for these last few years on Earth, she'll finally get this thing that she's been craving. And I think she'll find when she's there that it doesn't do anything to fill that hole in the soul you're talking about. And it's still going to be there. And she's still going to have this desire for even more power, which is pathetic on her end, but also that's where it gets really dangerous for the rest of us.
It does feel like any generic, nationally known Republican would easily defeat, given the realities of the email and all the stuff that's come out, would easily defeat Hillary. But it also feels like the other side of it is true as well, which is that I think Joe Biden would probably beat Trump pretty handily. I think any mainstream Democrat would win against Trump. It's sort of a bizarre election in that way.
Yeah, both of these candidates are pulling not only the country but their own parties down, destroying them in their own narcissistic pursuit of I think for Hillary it's power. For Trump, I think it's more of attention and publicity, which are really two different things that they want, which is also interesting. But that's what they're both doing. And I think it's absolutely true that provided in an alternative universe, provided Trump is still the nominee, they could have put anyone against him, the Democrats could have. I mean, almost anyone. They've got a lot of strange characters in that party, but they could have run almost any of them. Even Bernie Sanders, they could have run, take any of the few others that were in the primary, Martin O'Malley, just any of these guys. They could have put him up against Donald Trump, but I think they'd be winning in a landslide right now. It wouldn't even be close. But and Hillary must have known that. At some level, she must have known that to be the case, but her pride just wouldn't let it go. And she could have, if she had passed the baton to one of these others, some younger person, and just resigned, then she could have she would have been respected for that. She could have basked in the respect that she would have gotten for that, and then she could have just gone off and run her foundation and made money from dictators overseas and everything else, and she could have lived that way. It would have been great for her.
Yeah, she would have loved it, I think. But anyway, she wants to continue on with that. Bill, it seems, may stay on as chairman or whatever of the Clinton Foundation. But I wanted to get also into the Colin Kaepernick situation. I don't know if you've seen, Matt, it just bumped up on my screen today that now Kaepernick's jersey is the number one selling jersey from the NFL store. You also have this female U.S. soccer player whom I'd never heard of before because I just don't really care that much about U.S. soccer, male or female. She's also kneeling during the night. So clearly people are getting some benefit out of this. And then President Obama weighs in. I want to play the clip of Obama, Matt, and have you react to the president speaking about this. Play it, John.
My understanding, at least, is that he's exercising his constitutional right to make a statement. I think there's a long history of sports figures doing so. I think he cares about some real, legitimate issues that have to be talked about. If nothing else, what he's done is he's generated more conversation around some topics that need to be talked about.
So much to get into here, Matt. I mean, I think Kaepernick, never mind the fact that he was basically falling out of the NFL anyway, is just a self-indulgent, self-promoting punk. And I think that's what we see from other people now getting in on the act, too. What do you say?
Yeah, and Obama is such a disingenuous huckster. I mean, constitutional right. That wasn't this conversation. That's not the conversation we're having, Obama. Nobody said he didn't have the right to do it. Nobody made that argument. And that's what we keep hearing is, he has the right, he has free speech. No one said otherwise. Of course he has the right to sit down if he wants to. The NFL has the right to make rules against it. They haven't, so that means he has the right to do it. That's not the point. The point is that it's stupid. The statement that he's making makes no sense. He's not going about communicating whatever the statement is. He's not going about communicating in the right way. And I agree with you that I think first and foremost, it's insincere. This is he's going to the Michael Sam school of staying in the NFL, which worked for Michael Sam for a few years, and that's make yourself into a political statement, make yourself into a sacred cow, make it so that it'd be really difficult for teams to get rid of you because of the political ramifications, and then maybe you can hang around a little bit longer. Because Kaepernick has, he had one good year. For those who don't follow the NFL, he had one good year, one good half a year, one okay year, and he's been declining ever since. He wasn't going to be on a roster probably this year, at least not starting. And maybe this will be enough to keep him around. And I think that's why he did it. Because when you actually listen to him explain, especially originally, he's kind of honed his message ever since. But you listen originally to him explain what he was doing, it didn't even make any sense. It's not like he had some really articulate, fiery, passionate statement to explain why he did it. It was just this kind of rambling, incoherent, nonsensical mess. And so I think it's pretty clear that the real reason is, I'm just looking for attention.
Yeah, it was sort of a plagiarism of Black Lives Matter rhetoric from somebody who had only read the Cliffs Notes or something. I mean, it didn't seem like he even understood the issues beyond them, or I should say understood the movement such as it is beyond the most superficial level. But I also think there's an interesting commentary that comes from the fact that the jerseys are now flying off the shelves as a result of him saying this. There are clearly people for whom any form of this sort of solidarity with Black Lives Matter strikes a chord and is a means of now professional advancement for public figures. I mean, there are a lot of people out there, it seems, who this is to them an act of bravery of some kind.
Yeah, it's a trendy and easy thing for people to jump on board with. So I guess I'm not too surprised by the jersey thing, although it's pretty pathetic. I also think that disrespecting the flag, disrespecting not exhibiting patriotism, disrespecting the anthem. These are trendy and easy things also, and that appeals to people, unfortunately, especially younger people, because it's not cool to just stand up and show respect. We don't do that anymore. We don't just show respect. That's not cool. So it's much cooler to make it all about me. And that's the thing. That's what Kaepernick is doing. When you stand for the anthem, it's not about endorsing everything the country has ever done. Obviously, if that were the case, then no conservative would ever stand for the anthem because Obama's in charge right now. We've been doing a lot of things we disagree with. But we stand because it's about what the country stands for, what it means, and it's also about being in solidarity with our countrymen and just a unified moment that's not all about us. It's a moment. It's a little short, simple moment of unity where it's not about you, where you're not standing out. And Kaepernick can't deal with that, and it appears that a lot of other people, they can't deal with it either. It has to be all about them, and so I think that's really what it's about.
And Matt, I know you're a football fan. Do you think the NFL will take some sort of action here, or is it just too hot for them to handle?
I think it's probably, it's probably too hot. They're pretty slow on taking action on these kind of things, and I think they also know that a lot of their players agree with Kaepernick and they don't want to deal with it. But they could and should come out and say, look, this, as a matter of decorum, at the very least, you're required to stand for the anthem, and if you don't, there's going to be fines. Other sports leagues have done that. I think the NBA has, although don't quote me on it. But you can certainly do that. They should do it. But I think the NFL is run by cowards, and they're more worried about the optics of it. So then I don't think they're going to do it.
And last one for you, Matt. Best new TV show of the last 90 days. Matt Walsh says what?
Oh, man. I wish you had warned me that I could.
That's on the spot, on the hot seat here. There's Stranger Things. There's Narco Season 2. What comes to mind?
Yeah, I'm watching Narco Season 2. I liked Stranger Things. I thought it was a little bit overrated. I wasn't a big fan of the ending, but Narco Season 2 I'm watching right now. I'm like 4 episodes in. And I think it's good entertainment.
All right. Fair enough. Well, if you have any more thoughts on that, Matt, we'll bring you back. Talk a little more TV shows. Matt
I'll
Walsh
do a whole segment on that if you want to.
Oh, dude, that sounds great. Well, let's talk about new TV shows, guys. We'll do that. Matt will have you back, and we'll make that happen. Thank you, sir. Matt Walsh is the host of the Matt Walsh podcast. Guys, you should download it. Go to theblaze.com/radio for that. And, of course, read his incredibly popular pieces on theblaze.com. Matt, always a pleasure, sir. Thanks for calling.
Thanks a lot, Buck.
Team, we've got more. Stay with me.
The Buck Sexton Show.
Discover more at theblaze.com/radio.
The Blaze Radio Network. The Buck Sexton Show.
Team, Facebook Live today. Let's do it. 3 p.m. Eastern. I might even take things up to the roof, although it depends. If I get all sweaty and gross up there, I might have to stop. Oh, no, I can't up there because I don't have the good enough Wi-Fi. We'll do it. Whatever. Facebook Live, 3 o'clock today. It's more fun if you join me, so otherwise I'm sort of talking to myself. We'll do sort of Ask Buck Anything, sort of take random questions as they come in, be a chance to hang out, because I've missed all of you. So we didn't get to hang out at all last week, really. I mean, I guess on the EIB, but that's a less personalized Team Buck experience in the sense that we have to sort of share our attention with the other millions of folks around the country listening to Rush, which is great and a great honor, but a little bit of a different vibe than the closeness, the family feeling of the Freedom Hut, which is what we usually have. So. That's what we'll be doing at 3 o'clock. I've got a couple of guests coming up in the next hour. We're talking a little national security. Because I mix it up, everybody, because Buck knows how to party. And we'll talk a bit about that. I'm trying to think of other things that come to mind that we may be hitting on. I don't know. We might even talk about the latest annoying thing Piers Morgan said, which I feel like I shouldn't, because we shouldn't talk about Piers Morgan because who cares? But sometimes it's fun to rip on the guy. And we've got some other stuff to be hitting on, too. So basically, this is my vague preview of Hour 3 coming up in a second, because I thought I had 15 seconds left there, and in fact, I had a minute left. That's not on you, John. That's on me, because I lost. I wasn't paying attention for a second. It's all right. Yeah, I know you were right. I just spaced out for a second there. I was thinking Matt Walsh tweeted at me in the break that The Americans is the best show that he's seen in the last 90 days, but it was the end of this. It was the end of that series. And I agree with him. Stranger Things. I haven't even finished it, but I mean, I'm halfway through, and I'm very nostalgic for it. Like, it brings back kind of a cool period in my mind of, early 80s and all that stuff. Although I was kind of a baby then, but you know what I mean. But it's not as awesome as I kind of wish it was. It could have been a little better. I'm just saying. Narco Season 2, though, I am super psyched for. I'm going to be starting that tonight. We'll be talking more about that. Maybe at some point we should just do like a Killing Pablo hour on the show where we talk about Pablo Escobar and the incredible book written by Mark Bowden called Killing Pablo, which I highly, highly recommend to any of you as just a really interesting, just a fascinating and quick read. Team, third hour coming up. It's going to be awesome, which means I'm going to need you to stay with me. Stay right there.
The Buck Sexton Show.
Only on the Blaze Radio Network. Now, spreading freedom across the nation. This is
The Buck Sexton Show.
All right, team, welcome back to the Freedom Hut. We're joined now by Amber Smith. She is the author of Danger Close, My Epic Journey as a Combat Helicopter Pilot in Iraq and Afghanistan, just released on September 6th, 2016, which is today, as it turns out. Amber, great to have you as always.
It's great to be with you and back on your show.
So please tell us a bit about the book. What do you talk about in Danger Close?
So my book, Danger Close, it's the untold story of the Kiowa Warrior helicopter in Iraq and Afghanistan and how essential the mission, the aircraft, the pilots were in two theaters of operation and how they contributed to battlefield success every single day in combat operations. So it really takes the reader into the cockpit and it lets everybody know what it is like to be a Kiowa Warrior pilot at war. So it's my journey, from start to finish at a young age, how I got interested in aviation and the military, and it takes you through my training and then combat in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Now, well, talk to us a bit about how you decided to become a combat aviator. What was the process like? What pushed you toward this, and how did you make the final decision that this was going to be the area of the military in which you would serve?
So I grew up in a very patriotic family, and I have this military past all the way back to World War I when my great-grandfather, he was an infantryman in the Army. He fought in the Battle of Verdun. My grandfather was in the Army Air Corps in World War II. He flew planes between Europe and Northern Africa in those routes. And then my dad was in the 82nd Airborne as a paratrooper. My uncle was in the 101st Airborne, and then my mom was a civilian pilot, and both of my sisters are military pilots, so you could say that I was, flying's in my blood. I was sort of born into it, and I was bitten by the aviation bug at an early age. But I took the standard route of going to college right out of high school. I was, I sort of put my flight ambitions on the back burner for a while, and then 9/11 happened. I was in college, and, I saw what everybody else saw on TV when the planes hit the World Trade Centers, and it reignited my want to serve this country, and I knew that the best way that I could contribute to fighting for our nation and ensuring that the freedoms that everyone before me had fought to preserve is through those aviation channels in the military. So I looked at all the different branches, and every single one of them told me to come back after I finished my degree, and then they talked to me about becoming a pilot, and I was ready. I was like, nope, I know my path. I want to go right now. And so I finally walked into an Army recruiter's office, and I talked to them, and they had the program that was perfect for me. If I was selected, I could go straight in as a warrant officer and become a helicopter pilot. So I took all the tests, I did all the interviews, and I ended up applying for the warrant officer flight program, and that is the path that I went down to join the Army.
Tell us a bit about the OH-58D Kiowa Warrior helicopter platform. I feel like people are perhaps more familiar with the Black Hawk and the Apache, just Black Hawk Down, and the Apache is the Apache. Yep. But tell me about the Kiowa. What's the difference with the platform, and what are some of the mission parameters?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Kiowa is the, unknown aircraft of the Army, and it is we're basically a mini gunship. So we're a light attack reconnaissance helicopter. It only has 2 seats, one for the co-pilot, one for the pilot. We carry a 50 cal machine gun, a rocket pod that carries up to 7 high explosive rockets, and then we can have a weapons configuration to carry Hellfire missiles. But sort of what separates our mission from all the other aircraft in, the military aviation inventory is that we fly extremely low level, well within the eyesight of the enemy and well within the weapons range of the enemy. So we're very much in the fight with the ground guys day in and day out. So one day we might be providing convoy security where we fly right above a ground convoy where we're hunting for IEDs and trying to stop the convoy if we spot an IED, or we could be conducting reconnaissance in the mountains of Afghanistan, searching for enemy operations or movement routes, stuff like that. So it's never 2 days of the same thing. It's a lot going on, and the mission is just unique because of that relationship that we have with the ground guy. We work with literally any friendly forces that are on the ground. I've worked with NATO forces, infantry, Marines, special forces, you name it. They're on the ground. They need help. We're there for them.
Now, how common was it when you were for there to be a female combat aviators? I mean, people often have this discussion about whether women should be in infantry combat, and that, there's a lot of back and forth, even over the last 12 months that come out of that discussion. But you were a pilot of as you said, of a gunship platform on the front lines in combat. Were there other women in similar roles, and how did you feel like that was accepted within the military hierarchy?
So I got to my unit in 2004, and it doesn't seem that long ago, but believe it or not, women were still very rare in those positions, and it was also the only branch within combat arms, so most of those combat jobs that you were just talking about that don't allow women, aviation was the only combat arms job that allowed women to serve in combat roles. So yes, we were definitely in that combat role prior to the Pentagon restriction when they lifted the restriction last December. So there was one other female pilot when I got to my unit or my troop at Fort Campbell, Kentucky in 2004 of about 40 people. And by the time I got out in 2010, that had definitely grown a lot. But in the light attack reconnaissance community, it's definitely much smaller in terms of how many women, the percentage number of women that are there. And it was an interesting dynamic. I grew up with 2 sisters. I didn't have any brothers, so I was a 22-year-old kid, that joined my troop. And so it was an eye-opening experience to be around them, and I learned to develop thick skin pretty quick, but I learned that the best way to sort of show that I was there to do the exact same job that everybody else was in the troop was to be a good pilot and to work really hard at my job and to show them that I wasn't looking for any special treatment. I was just there to serve my country, to be a good Kiowa Warrior pilot, and to complete the mission. And so that's what I always say. If you're in a male-dominated environment and you want to show that you're there to, for no reason other than doing your job, just work hard, keep your eye on the prize, so to speak, and you'll get there.
What makes a great attack helicopter pilot, or just military helicopter pilot in general? What are some of the skills? What separates out sort of the good from the elite in that role?
You can't substitute experience. So when you start out, you have a lot to learn. And so I would say to be very humble and to know that you have a lot to learn, and to not get in over your head. Things happen very quickly in a helicopter. And I mean like seconds, where everything could be fine and dandy 1 second, and the next, you're hoping you don't crash, you could take fire, etc. But you have to have a lot of discipline. So much more goes into flying a helicopter than just wiggling the sticks, as we call it, with the collective and the cyclic and the pedals. You have to be very disciplined with memorization and learning so much about the aircraft mechanically, aerodynamics, aeromed. There's a lot that goes into it. And so, but flying on its own, I go into this in great detail in my book about what it's like to, in my book, Danger Close, what it's like to learn how to fly a helicopter and how long it takes to learn how to hover. And it's sort of like, balancing on a beach ball and rubbing your stomach and your head at the same time. So it takes a while to learn how to do everything, but there's definitely no substitute for experience. The more you do it, the better you get. And the same with shooting. So the Kiowa platform, we have guns, as I mentioned, and so we have to be shooting from that aerial platform. So not only are you flying to aircraft, talking on 5 different radios, navigating, talking with the ground guys, but then you also are potentially shooting a 50 cal machine gun. So you have to make sure you know where the friendlies are at all time, where the enemies are at all time. There could be an artillery mission where they're, lobbing mortar rounds to a specific area. And then you could also have close air support on station. So think Air Force or Navy, like fighter jets that are flying up ahead, up above you in altitude. So you're coordinating all of that at once, and you have to stay on top of everything, and it is constantly changing. So when you're shooting as well, you have to make sure, you're putting rounds on target. So there's a lot to stay on top of.
Am I allowed to ask you your call sign, by the way? Goose, Maverick, Iceman, any of the...
Absolutely. My call sign was Annihilator 2-4.
Annihilator 2-4. Wow. That's not what not what I would have expected. Quite a thing in case somebody asks you in a bar, hey, what's your call sign? Annihilator. All right. I'm glad.
You're not the first to say that, Buck.
I'm glad we established that. Okay. Amber Smith, guys, her book is out now, Danger Close, My Epic Journey as a Combat Helicopter Pilot in Iraq and Afghanistan. It is awesome. I recommend you guys all check it out. It's on Amazon or in fine bookstores near you. Amber, thank you for your service and thank you for your call. Great as always to talk to you.
Thanks so much, Buck. Appreciate it.
Phone lines are open, team, and we will be right back.
Buck Sexton, dispensing the truth.
On the Blaze Radio Network.
This is the Buck Sexton Show.
We're joined now by our buddy Adam Credo. He is a senior writer for the Washington Free Beacon, and there's some interesting stuff up on the Free Beacon now, which we are going to talk to him about. Adam, always good to have you. Thanks for calling in.
Always great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So you've got a piece up. Congress moves to block Obama administration's ransom payments to Iran. What the heck is going on here, Mr. Credo?
Well, look, we're finally seeing some reaction from Congress. They've just gotten back into session, and I think this is the beginning of what lawmakers, particularly GOP lawmakers, are going to try to do to hold the administration to account for these secret side deals and these payments that they've made to the Iranians. During the break, a lot of news came out about what the Obama administration was doing, and I found and other reporters found that Congress, by and large, was left in the dark when it came to these cash ransoms that were paid, when it came to these secret side deals that were inked with the Iranians in regards to the nuclear deal. So what we have here is Senator Rubio and several other GOP senators and Mike Pompeo in the House introducing a bill that, one, is going to ban any further payments to the Iranians, whether it's a ransom, whether it's a legal judgment for past kind of legal problems we'd have with the Iranians, and there are many outstanding in the International Tribunal Court to this day. So it would block any of this from being resolved. And that $1.3 billion that we gave to Iran, it actually mandates that the Iranians give it back and pay out about $53 billion to U.S. terror victims, U.S. victims who have been wounded, killed, injured as a result of attacks planned by the Iranians. So this is really the first attempt, I think, to kind of put down the hammer and say enough of this nonsense.
What happens if the administration says this is different, this is separate, this is not a ransom payment, and Congress doesn't have authority to block this executive transfer? That would force quite an issue, wouldn't it? Because this is money. Congress has power of the purse. Can the president just decide to try to do an end run? How do you think this plays out?
The president could certainly do that. Now, here's where I find the most tricky part. We've already paid the Iranians. You know as well as I do that bombshell story from Jay Solomon at the Wall Street Journal about the pallets of cash that were delivered to Iran, hard currency from the U.S. So I don't know exactly how you get that back, right? I don't think the Iranians are going to say, yeah, okay, we'll give that money right back to you, because they're already investing it into their military. So that I think is tough. But stopping the administration from going forward could be a very interesting issue. Now, the Obama administration could exert executive privilege and say, we're doing what we want. But legally, Congress does have the ability to instruct the Treasury Department to shut down that fund and stop giving money from it. So that's where we're going to see, I think, a lot of the technical argument here.
Administration can't back down on this without losing a tremendous amount of face, right? Because if this does fall, I mean, they can't even allow the notion of this being a ransom payment to stay out there for too long. Or, I mean, they can't cave on this because they've been saying all along that this was, well, I don't know, it was, a separate negotiation, whatever they call it. I think they came up with a term for it. I've forgotten what it is now. But, it was a cash inducement for the release of hostages. So they're going to fight on this one. I think Republicans realize they're going to draw out the Obama administration on this a bit.
Well, they are, because we're also going to see, aside from legislation in the next couple of weeks, I think we're going to see a lot of hearings about the circumstances surrounding not just these cash payments, but what's been going on with the nuclear deal. You haven't seen a lot of coverage on this. Of course, I've been following it, and we covered it at the Free Beacon routinely, but a number of secret side deals, a number of secret caveats in the deal that we didn't know about that cuts down very technical things like research and development for the Iranians, makes it easier for them to put online advanced nuclear centrifuges, enables them to conduct ballistic missile technology research, things of this nature. I think the administration is going to be held to account and going to be asked, why is it that you told us certain things about the deal that turned out to be untrue, and why did you hide it from Congress and the American people?
What do you think of the chances that there'll be some serious questions from the press corps thrown in Hillary Clinton's direction about Obama's Iran deal? Yeah, I feel like they don't want to go down that path, but they kind of have to, or else they risk looking like a bunch of lapdogs, or maybe they don't care.
I think some of them care. I would say by and large, and I don't think this is surprising, but there's a certain level of ignorance on this issue. People just don't know the facts because it's complicated and it takes time to look into and become educated on. I think there's a lack of that in the mainstream press right now. Everybody jumps from one story of the day to the next, whatever's sexiest at that time, and this certainly doesn't have that element. The second thing is, I don't know how the hell you ask Hillary Clinton about this, that she won't go to the podium to hold a press conference. It's quite bizarre, but this should be one of the top questions she gets asked when she decides she's going to answer to the press.
Top story right now on the Washington Free Beacon. Firm founded by Clinton chair reps corrupt Serbian oligarchs' business interests. What's this all about?
Yeah, this is a fascinating one found by Lachlan Markay, who's a really talented reporter for us. And this surrounds a lobbying firm that Clinton's campaign chairman founded and was run by a top fundraiser for the Clinton campaign. And he discovered that they actually have quite a few business interests over there in Serbia. Now, this is an individual who's not only been accused by the Serbian government, but the U.S. government of corruption and all sorts of bad behavior. And this is really another piece of evidence, another fact in the long line of corruption by Clinton cronies involved in the foundation, involved in the nonprofits. And there's really, again, on this front, a lack of account from the Clinton campaign. She never has to answer why it is that so many times individuals in her orbit end up to be some of the most corrupt international players in the world.
Everyone should check out this piece. Firm founded by Clinton chair reps corrupt Serbian oligarchs' business interests. Podesta Group lobbies for company implicated in $40 million embezzlement scheme. Lachlan Markay is the writer. It's up on the Free Beacon, but we are speaking to Adam Credo, who's the writer of that other piece, which is also on the Free Beacon. Adam, really appreciate your time today, sir. Great to have you, as always.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. Team, phone lines open if you want to call in, 888-900-3393. We're finishing up strong on the Buck Sexton Show. We'll be right back in just a few.
The Buck Sexton Show on the Blaze Radio Network.
You're listening to the Buck Sexton Show.
I love these pieces that come up in the New York Times where you have to think that the writers are educated and sane enough to realize that they're sort of typing out insanity. But maybe not. Maybe I give them too much credit. This is the New York Times today. Campuses cautiously train freshmen against subtle insults. And then they go through some of these different cases of, well, this is all about diversity training and safe spaces and trigger warnings and microaggressions. And it talks about how this is like, I'm sure they're going to start just making videos and showing these incoming freshmen as well. So you have... Don't hear among the tips from this diversity educator they're talking about here at, what was the school? I forget where it was. Clark University, which I've never heard of before, but who cares? Among her tips, don't ask an Asian student you don't know for help on your math homework, or randomly ask a black student if he plays basketball. Both questions make assumptions based on stereotypes. Okay. Don't say you guys. It could be interpreted as leaving out women. See, I guess this is really a call for y'all. There you go. We should all just start saying y'all. It should no longer just be a Southern thing, because we need a contraction to refer to everyone. And folks has been appropriated by politicians, including President Obama, many others too, though. Whenever they want to sound like they're just one of the folks, they start saying folks a lot. And they go through some of the other... tutorials they give on this campus, and I mean, some of them are hilarious. Some of them are pretty terrifying. And they mention in the piece that this does have the feel of a communist re-education camp. I mean, they're telling adults. These are adults. Remember, college students are adults. They may seem young to many of us now, but the reality is that they are fully functional and formed adults in the eyes of the law, and can vote and fight in the military and are responsible for their actions. The worst stuff is, well, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff, but the stuff that really is particularly pernicious in my view has to do with the sexual assault guidelines and the sort of way that they create these tribunals on campus that punish people for sexual assault outside of legal mechanisms, when the reality is that this is a strictly legal issue. Right, sexual assault is a crime. It's not a campus regulatory problem. I mean, imagine for a second. Rape is a serious crime. We all understand that. We all know that. It is malum in se. It is not malum prohibitum, right? We talked about this distinction before. Malum in se is things that are obviously bad. This is sort of a legal parsing here. Malum prohibitum are things that are bad because the government or the authority says they are bad. A lot of malum prohibitum law I find to be immoral and egregiously enforced, but that's a separate discussion for a different day. Malum in se is don't kill somebody because you don't like them, right? That's obviously wrong. You can't do that. Thou shalt not kill. This is like 10 Commandments level stuff, although these days the 10 Commandments aren't exactly respected either. But you know what I'm saying. Rape is a serious crime. Imagine for a moment that the campus decided that there was a dead body found, and they were going to have and let's say the police showed up and they said, look, this was a suicide. And then the campus, so there's no charges that are going to be brought. And then the campus said, well, we're not convinced that it's a suicide. We think that there might have been some thing said to this person that led to their suicide. So we're going to do a sort of a tribunal here on campus to see if this was a wrongful death that we will investigate on our own. People would say, that's crazy. The campus has no role in doing that. This is a police, this is a legal matter. The campus has no criminal prosecutorial authority or criminal investigatory authority whatsoever. That's what they're doing with sexual assault cases now. They act as though there's this separate law for sexual assault, and then they set it up so that it's skewed specifically against the accused in favor of the accuser. The idea here being that overwhelmingly it'll be female accusers of males. I still, and this can be controversial for some, and I don't really care because this is a matter of principle. I still need someone to explain to me how it is, for example, that on many college campuses, if a male and a female are both beyond the sort of limit of drinking, which is already kind of a murky, what's the alcohol consent? Obviously, somebody who's passed out is not able to give consent, right? So that's clear. But what's the sort of I'm too drunk to consent line? Where is that line? And then more to the point I'm making now, if both parties are beyond the too drunk to consent line, why is the male guilty of assault but the female is not? That is inherently based upon a sort of a sexist stereotype that males are the sexual aggressors in all relationships, which is not always true, by the way. So why is that okay to keep that sort of old way of thinking in place? Because really a lot of this stuff is inherently anti-male, I'll be honest with you. And that's not to say that there aren't, and I'm familiar with many of the cases on campus that are quite real. But you'll notice that the cases where it's not really murky or in dispute oftentimes end up in the criminal justice system. And those that don't, that should, it's a function of how difficult it is for some young women to go through this process. It's difficult. It's hurtful to them. That reopens the wounds. I understand all of that too. And so maybe they don't want to press further charges. They view the seeing it through as being more damaging than, they don't feel like there'll be any justice or reparation from their attacker, their assaulter in this case, being even imprisoned. That doesn't make them better necessarily. These are decisions that people make, but this is true of the criminal justice system in general. This is true of, a home invasion and vicious assault as well. I mean, some people may decide that they're not going to go forward with charges based on an assault if it's somebody that they knew. I mean, home invasion's different, but I'm talking about domestic battery, for example. They won't necessarily press charges. There are complexities here. With campuses, though, what are they doing? How is that supposed to make any sense? And, of course, they go forward with all this stuff despite the fact that the accused has no right necessarily to counsel. The accused has no right to much of anything. And this is going to create more problems than it solves on campus. As I said, this should be a criminal issue. But these are also societal issues that have to be addressed. If two people are drunk, why is the male guilty of assault but the female is not? If it's about alcohol and consent, I need that to be explained to me, and not by somebody who's just going to fall into, hysterics and ad hominem attack. And we're talking about consenting? Well, not necessarily consenting, depending on the issue, but we're talking about adults who are drinking. Why is the male guilty? If they're both drunk and they can both prove, let's say they have similar blood alcohol content level. I mean, I don't know how you'd even prove this, right? You get into the details of these cases, that can be very difficult. But what I always find interesting is, I knew of guys, and when I was in college, for example, who females, young women came onto them very strongly while they were, the guys were blitzed out of their minds, and it would never have occurred to them that this was something that they were going to press charges about. Some of them might have felt a little weird about it. Maybe some of them laughed about it. Depends on the situation. But that certainly happened. So, there is a standard here that is not really clear or obvious, and that has really serious ramifications for people's lives. It can ruin people's lives. Try applying for a job. Well, I was convicted of sexual assault in college, but other than that, everything's great. Look at my resume. You're done. So there's some very serious stuff that comes up in this article, too, and it has to do with the way that they define. I've told you this before. I was at a because I actually went through all this reeducation training myself. I was what's called a resident counselor, which is sort of like an RA in schools. Except at Amherst, they realized that nobody would want the job if there was a disciplinary function. So there was no discipline. You didn't write people up. You didn't call the police. You didn't do any of that stuff. You just sort of were there. And if someone needed someone to talk to, or they, wanted, help with something, you were kind of a counselor. I mean, you were sort of in the building, and they could come in and talk to you, and you kind of had an open door policy for certain hours of the week. And part of the job was handing out prophylactic devices, including prophylactic devices that I was not even familiar with before my role as an RC. I will not get into the details, but I had some sexual health learning to do in my role as an RC. But I went through all this training, and I remember one girl saying that to her, because we were discussing this, like, what is sexual assault? This was an open, and there must have been, 60 or 70 of us who were RCs on the campus. It was a small school. Maybe there were 80 of us, something like that. And we're in this sort of this forum discussion, and this one young woman whom I knew and was pretty friendly with said, well, to me, it really crosses a line into sexual assault if a guy asks you like 3 times in a row. And I was like, so now we're at the ask 3 times level? Will you sleep with me? No. Will you sleep with me? No. Will you sleep with me? Well, now it's sexual assault. I mean, it might be harassment and annoying, but I think to say that that's, and then if the woman consents, she was claiming that a line has been crossed here because of, and as I'm telling you this, understand that most of the room was sort of nodding in agreement. Yeah. I mean, if you're too persistent, that's really like a form of sexual assault. And my jaw was on the floor. I was like, what? If you're too persistent? I mean, yeah, if you're like Pepe Le Pew and you're, grabbing someone, you will not escape my grasp. I will not let you go. And you're, yeah, that's like creepy and weird, but asking 3 times, that doesn't seem like a line has been crossed, certainly not in the legal sense. But this is what they're teaching your kids. This is what they're teaching some of you if you're in college and you're listening. This is what they teach on college campuses now. There's a bit of a backlash that comes from alumni who aren't writing the same kind of checks as they used to. And there's also, there are a few schools, UChicago most notably among them, that are sort of pushing back on this safe space triggering microaggression nonsense. But I mean, some of this stuff in this piece, first of all, this is crazy to me. At the University of Wisconsin-Madison, officials have put together a diversity presentation as a pilot program for 1,000 freshmen. This program costs $150,000 to $200,000. Okay, a guy at the university put a video on YouTube after a racist incident. This guy's name is Patrick Sims. He was the University of Wisconsin-Madison's vice provost for diversity and climate. That's actually a job. Vice provost for diversity and climate. So it's like, let's just take a couple of progressive left-wing causes, left-wing ideological positions, diversity and climate, and put them together and give somebody a job where they oversee those things. I mean, imagine if a university had a vice provost for the Bible and guns, right? People would freak out. Although there probably are some universities maybe that have that, but that's cool. But generally speaking, people I think would look askance at that and think that that's kind of a strange position to create at a publicly funded university. Certainly the left would, like progressives, Democrats, they would be very, they would not be fond of that at all. So anyway, I look at this, and there was another one. I'm trying to find some of the great trigger warning examples they give. There, you guys is one of them. You can't say you guys anymore, and you obviously can't say you girls because what if someone's in transition? Who knows? So you don't know. So we need to. It's a call for y'all. We need to all start saying y'all all the time to not upset these people. And then they talked about environmental microaggressions, which is when, as an example, this is one they gave. On your first day of class, you enter the chemistry building, and all the pictures on the wall are scientists who are white and male. If you're female, that space shows that you're not represented. So now, history is itself a microaggression, an environmental microaggression. And if you walk through, if you walk through any portrait gallery of U.S. presidents, that's a microaggression, right? Haven't had a female yet. Where does this stuff end? It's already fallen into self-parody, but they can't back out now. They've been pushing for this stuff for so long. And this goes all the way to the top. I mean, Obama and Hillary, they buy into all this crap, too. This is now the culture. I mean, you go to Mike.com and Huffington Post and some of these other sites, they take this stuff seriously. And I have to think that if you had drinks with a lot of these writers and such in a social setting normally, they'd have to recognize that this is like a joke, right? But some of them are sort of stone-faced, hyper-feminist, hyper-progressive lunatics who I guess would defend all of this. And I love talking about this campus stuff. It's crazy. I want to just go and give a giant microaggression traveling tour of campuses, but that'll have to wait. Back in a few minutes, team.
Buck Sexton.
The Blaze Radio Network.
Buck Sexton. The Blaze Radio Network.
So good to be back with you all, team. I miss you when I'm not here in the Freedom Hut at the mic, getting a chance to chat with you all across the country and in some cases around the world. I'll be back, obviously, tomorrow live, all this week and for the foreseeable here in the hut, doing what I do. I'm going to be going on Facebook Live here in just a few minutes. Give me till about 3 Eastern to get it set up in the hut, which will be a whole lot of fun. So get your questions ready now. You can ask me what I did over the break, although it'll involve me talking about eating, sleeping, playing tennis, and visiting donkeys and horses and hanging out with a French bulldog named Tallulah. Other than that, not a lot of, and my family, of course, too. Other than that, not a lot of particularly exciting stories. But we'll do a little Inside the Freedom Hut on Facebook Live. So just go to facebook.com/Buck Sexton, and you can join in there. And also email me your thoughts and such, as always, and send me messages on Facebook. And I'm just excited to be back here talking to you guys all week. We've got a very spectacular guest.